Hello everybody, welcome back to History of Spriggs. My name is Spriggs, and today we'll be talking about the Second Crusade. Well, here it is, the Second Crusade. After the First Crusade, and the Minor Crusade of 1101, the Crusader state of Edessa, the most northerly and the most least populated of all the Crusader states, was under attack, which further weakened the country, and at the Battle of Haran, May 7th, 1104, then Count of Edessa, Baldwin II, and future Count of Edessa, Joscelin the First of Courtenay, were captured by the Seljuks, and again in 1122. Edessa recovered somewhat after the Battle of Asses in 1125. Meanwhile, Zengi had added Aleppo to his rule in 1128, and both Zengi and Baldwin II turned to Damascus, but was defeated outside the city. And to take back Aleppo, Joscelin II, the successor of Joscelin I of the Count of Edessa, allied with the Archiquids, marched out of Edessa, and Zengi, knowing this, hurried to Edessa and besieged it, and the siege lasted a month. But on December 24th, 1143, he took the city. And the Muslims took the rest of Edessa, or the Crusader state sold parts of itself to the Byzantines. And so Zengi was assassinated by a slave, and his son succeeded him. But when the news reached Europe, Pope Eugene III, then Pope, called for a crusade. But this would be more organized and have a route and commanded by Europe's greatest kings, and if you watch my first crusade video, if you remember, it was very unorganized, and the Pope basically just called for everyone in Europe and just to come down to Constantinople and go out and pillage the Celtic territory and take Jerusalem. And they even pillaged Christian states. And so, at first, this would seem like a success, and it would make sense that, well, the Catholics, would win, because, they have a route this time, and if they were defeating them last time disorganized, they should be able to defeat them organized now. But then, Pope Eugene appointed Saint Bernard to spread the word about this and to try and get multiple countries to join. He sent others too, but this was the main one. And the Pope expanded the crusade to the Iberian Peninsula, which was going through Reconquista, which lasted a very long time, up until 1492. The same year, Christopher Columbus set out to America. And so, as he expanded there, the Crusaders left Dartmouth, England, but due to bad weather, they stopped at Porto in Portugal, where they met King Alfonso I, where they agreed they would help take Lisbon, but they could sack the city for supplies after they took it. they took the offer, and they set siege, and they besieged it, and it started July 1st and ended October 25th. They took the city from the Moorish Islams, and some stayed in the city, and some left for the Levant. The Crusaders did. And Joscelin II took Edessa following Zengi's murder, but Nur ad-Din defeated him, and Nur ad-Din was the successor of Zengi, and he defeated him on November 1146. And the French Crusaders met at attempts to discuss their route. The Germans decided to go overland due to bad relations with the Kingdom of Sicily, but the Byzantines weren't too pleased by this, because also, if you remember from my last video, the disorganized Crusaders sacked Constantinople and Byzantine territory. With this, because it would take, but they did it anyways, even though the Byzantines did not approve of it. When the German army of 20,000 men arrived in the Byzantine territory, then Emperor Emmanuel I Komnenos feared an attack and sent troops west, and unruly Germans skirmished with the Byzantines, but mainly went through unharmed. And so, as they passed through, they had skirmishes at Philippopolis and Adrianople. And in September, a flood killed even more Germans. And this was already a bad start, even though they had an organized route and everything. But on September 10th, they arrived in Constantinople, and poor relations with Manuel resulting in the Battle of Constantinople. After the Germans crossed into Anatolia, or Asia Minor, they marched towards Iconium, the capital of the Caliphate. They didn't wait for the French, and then they marched towards Iconium, the capital of the Seljuk Caliphate of Rum. And so Conrad, the King Conrad, who was the leader of the Germans in this crusade, split his army into two major divisions. The Seljuks almost destroyed his entire army on the 25th of October, 1147, at the Second Battle of Dorylaeum. Manuel I made peace with the Seljuks, and this angered the Crusaders, but he lavishly entertained King Louis, who was the leader of the French and the king of the French, and he had good relations with King Louis, but not good relations with the French Crusaders. He lavishly entertained him in Constantinople. This angered the Crusaders, and the French met up with the Germans, or what was left of the Germans, and they met up, and they arrived at Ephesus, and learned of a Turkish attack. In 1147, December 24th, the French won the battle, and the French held the Turks off also at the battle, at the Battle of the Meander, and they reached Laodicea on the Lycus early January 1148. On January 6th, they met at the Battle of Mount Cadmus, and the French were crushed by the Turks. He raised them, and they raised them and burned the fields, and starving the troops as they destroyed the countryside they left. And this starved the troops, and they eventually made it to Attalia. They decided to go by sea, but the boats were later than expected, and half the ships were destroyed at sea by storms. So Louis and some soldiers claimed boats, and the rest were forced to reach Antioch by land. And this was a very long, excruciating journey, especially because the Turks had burned the fields behind them as they retreated back to their territory. There was minimal food that they could eat, and minimal supplies. And most died from disease or by Turkish attacks. Louis eventually arrived at Antioch on March 19th, and he quickly left for Tripoli. Conrad's army and the remnant of Otto of Fresin's army, and under the command of Alfonso of Jordan and the Count of Toulouse, sailed his army to Jerusalem, but he never made it himself. He died at Caesarea and was possibly poisoned, and this is unknown, but he was possibly poisoned by Raymond II of Tripoli. The original focus of the crusade was recapturing Edessa for the Crusaders, but King Baldwin III and the Knights of Templar's new focus was Damascus, and taking Damascus back. And so, a council was held at Acre, and they discussed the route they would take and to either capture Edessa or to capture other territories. They decided that they would head south to Damascus and besiege it. Damascus was the biggest city in southern Syria and was a major center, and if the Catholics took it, then they would have a huge important city that would fight against the resistance of Islam in the area. And so they headed south, and they went south, and they decided to attack from the west, where the orchards of the city were, and this would provide them food. The Turks were ready for the siege already and had prepared the city's defenses. And so, on July 24th, 1148, they attacked, and they made it up to the city's walls, but they were pushed back to the orchards, exposing them to guerrilla tactics. And then on July 27th, they moved towards the east, where it was less heavily fortified, and so they besieged it from there. And so they couldn't, as they came there was no food, which weakened the Crusaders, but also they couldn't retreat back to their better position, and if they didn't move to the eastward position to siege the city, they might have actually won the siege. But they eventually couldn't keep up with it, and the rulers decided to retreat to Jerusalem, and so they were followed by Turkish archers constantly harassing them, as was through most of the crusade. Well, thanks for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and please like and subscribe, and I hope you enjoyed it, and share it with a friend. If they don't listen, share it with an enemy. And with that being said, Spriggs out.